Life lessons from the Bible. Welcome once again to this channel, and welcome once again to our continuous study in biblical scriptures and the meaning of it. Once again, welcome to this specific study into Bible prophecy as we continue our look into the book of Revelation and what it means for us today, what it means, how it applies to us today, and how we could use it as we live our lives on a daily basis. Today we are in Revelation chapter 8, verses 6 to 13, and we are beginning to look at the judgments of the Bible through the trumpets, 7 trumpet judgments. And we're going to be, today specifically in this video, we'll be looking at the first 4 trumpets only, and then the other videos, subsequent videos to come, will be delving into the remaining trumpet judgments. Now, in order to get into these verses, these trumpets, first four trumpets, we need to set a foundation. I need to get some understanding a little more, and then with that foundation, get into these trumpets so we can really appreciate what these trumpet judgments mean. In order to do that, we need to get a big picture. We need to stop, pause, step back, and look at the big picture of what's going on here in the book of Revelation. With that big picture in mind, and to clarify some things in our mind, then get down into the specifics of the trumpets and the judgments that each of these trumpets speak about. So the question then therefore is, what is the big picture of what is going on here? Before we even delve into the details, let's get a big picture. The book of Revelation is really a book that shows us how God is going to get everything back to the original intent He always had. Revelation is a book which shows us a full circle, a full cycle being completed. God is bringing everything back to the way He always wanted it. And the book of Revelation is showing us how He is doing that. If you read the beginning of Genesis and you read the ending of the book of Revelation, they meet together. The way God is doing that, according to the book of Revelation, is by bringing judgments on the earth, by bringing rewards to His people and avenging them, and then by ushering His kingdom back into the earth, the New Jerusalem, new heaven and earth, and His kingdom being restored on the earth. This is primarily the means: judgment on the world, rewards for His people, and then bringing back, not only rewards, but avenging His people, and then bringing back His kingdom, His physical rule back on the earth. When we look at the judgments specifically, the book of Revelation shows us that God releases His judgments on the earth, but in 3 broad categories, if we could use that term, or in 3 broad ways. What the first one is called seals, the second is called trumpets, and then the third is called vials or bowls. And so God is releasing His judgments on the earth, but He's doing it in these three categories. We could use that too. Each of these categories has its own specific purpose and its own function within God's big plan. The goal, or what God has in mind when He releases judgments through the seals, is different from the goal behind releasing judgments when each trumpet is blown, and that is different goal from when each vial is poured. So each of these types of judgment, there are 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 vials, but each category has its own purpose, its own goal, what God is trying to achieve. But then all of them together, the seals, the trumpets, and judgment, overall form part of God's judgment, which is what He is using to bring the earth back to its original intent. So let's get a little more specific. The seals, when Jesus opens each seals, the purpose of the judgments in each of those seals is to restore mankind's inheritance to Him, to men. You read Revelation chapter 5, you'll see that when Jesus When the trumpets are blown, the angels blow each trumpet. The purpose behind the trumpet judgment is so that Jesus could judge unrepentant people, but simultaneously bring justice for his people, the church, and then bring the church to the perfection where it needs to be. That's the purpose behind the judgments for the trumpets. And you can read Revelation chapter 8, verses 3 to 5 to get an understanding of that. And that was actually the last video we did, so you can look at that video to get more understanding. But then the vials, when each of those vials are poured out on the earth by the angels, the purpose of those vial judgments is so that God the Father could release his wrath on the earth. Revelation chapter 16 verse 1 tells us that. And when God releases his wrath on the earth, and his wrath is released perfectly, complete, God then is able to bring everything completely around and put everything back to where his original intent was, always, how God always wanted it to be. So let's just say that quickly. The seals is so that man could receive his inheritance. The trumpet is so that Jesus could judge unrepentant people, but then eventually bring justice for his people and bring his people to the perfection where they need to be. And then the vials is so that God could pour his wrath on the earth, deal with the wickedness on the earth, and then take everything, turn it around, and bring everything back to where God always wanted it to be. This is what these judgments are about. When we look at the trumpet, the seals specifically, the first 4 seals were grouped together, and it was the Antichrist and war and famine and death and so on. And then you had the last 3 seals. That's the same kind of format for these trumpet judgments. The first 4 trumpets are grouped together, and in these groups, that is what we'll be studying today, the first 4 trumpets. And then you have the last 3 trumpets, which was even more intense, even more severe compared to the first 3, the first 4 trumpets. And then when you go to the vial judgments, the vials, 7 vials, those are even more intense judgments than what went before. So as you move along, as you progress, the intensity of the judgments and the intensity of what goes on increases. In other words, it gets worse as we move on. All right, but today we'll be looking at the trumpet judgments, and we'll be getting into the details with them. The trumpet judgments are, as we said, the first 4 are grouped together, and they speak about judgments with respect to trees and vegetation, with respect to the sea, with respect to the rivers. It talks about the heavenly bodies being affected. These first 4 judgments, first 4 trumpet judgments, mainly speak about physical catastrophes, physical things that happen on the earth, and with respect to heavenly bodies. But the last 3 trumpet judgments speaks about more intense spiritual things. It speaks about physical things going on the earth, but it shows more of the spiritual dynamics behind the physical activities, and it shows increased intensity in spiritual things, demonic activities, angelic activities, and so on. So the last 3 trumpets are very worse, and they get increasingly worse, and we'll talk about it as we get into what we're going to look at here. There's one last thing before we get into the details. There are a number of similarities between each of these types of judgment. In all 3, seals, trumpets, and vials, we see famine, we see signs in the heavens with heavenly bodies, things taking place, and then we see wars that are active on the earth. But then there are some things that are only similar between the vials and the trumpets. There's hailstorm taking place on the earth. In the trumpet judgments and in the vial judgments, God released hails. The sea is affected in the trumpet judgments and in the vial judgments, and then there are rivers affected in the trumpet judgments and the vial judgments. The difference is, whatever we see happen when God releases judgments through the trumpets, we just see it worse in the vial judgments. It just gets worse. So we could say it like this: the judgment that we see released when the trumpets are blown, they are bad, they are severe, they are suffering, but they are just simply signs of worse things to come. So it's judgment, but it's judgment that is not as bad as what is still to come. There's more intense things to take place. And as we get into them, you'll see and you'll understand what we are speaking about. All right, so let's delve into this and get into some details with respect to these judgments. The first 4 trumpets and what do they mean? Revelation chapter 8 verse 7. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. And as we delve into this and as we try to understand what these things mean, we need to make one point here. The book of Revelation, because of its very nature, it lends itself to numerous different interpretations. Revelation is prophetic, but it is a specific type of prophetic literature called apocalyptic literature. And apocalyptic literature is really, it's prophecy telling us things to come, but it tells us what are the things to come through symbols, types, imageries. And in order to really understand the book of Revelation, we need to know what these symbols mean. What do these imageries mean? You need to study the rest of the Bible and many times other books to understand. Because of having to understand these symbols and what they mean, sometimes there are different opinions, varied opinions on how to interpret the book of Revelation. One of the ways that people interpret it is literally what it says is what it means. And another way people interpret it is symbolically. They believe that when it says something is really symbols and it means something else. And so they don't believe that the specific things it says should be interpreted like that. They believe it's symbols. And so what we'll be doing is giving both sides, the literal interpretation and the symbolical interpretation, so that we can get an understanding of the views. But for me, in studying the book of Revelation over the years, I believe this specific passages we'll be looking at today should be interpreted literally. And as we get into them, I'll point it out even more. This first trumpet, actually not just this first trumpet only, but the first 4 trumpets, I believe, literally refers to an asteroid coming and impacting on the earth. And I believe that each trumpet, 1, 2, 3, and 4, represent the different stages in which that asteroid approach. So there's the first stage where the first part of that asteroid, the smaller parts of the asteroid impact Earth. And that's trumpet 1. And then trumpet 2 is where the asteroid gets closer until it impacts. And we have the consequences. And so let's delve into it. It says that there's hail and fire mingled with blood. Hail, this speaks about a real hailstorm. The literal interpretation here is that there's a real hailstorm with fire. Fire there means lightning. And this is coming because as this asteroid approaches and it impacts with the Earth's atmosphere, it is creating real hailstorm and fire and blood, real blood. And apparently this is because of people who are dying and so on, real blood. Also there on the earth. If you read Exodus chapter 9, verse 23, it speaks about the same hail and fire that was released against Egypt in the judgment there. If you read Joel chapter 2, verse 30, Joel chapter 2, verse 30 talks about in the last days after God restores Israel, that there will be signs in the moon and in the sun, and on the earth there will be blood and fire and pillars of smoke, which is probably volcanoes. But blood is there again. And it says these literal things, the hail, the fire, and the blood, they cause the third part of trees to be burnt up, and the green grass to be burnt up. In other words, vegetation. Trees there doesn't only mean trees generally, but it also means fruit trees specifically. So it's talking about food. This first judgment here is talking about the global food supply being affected. short term and long term being affected. Food supply for people, agriculture being affected, and food supply for animals as well. So the trumpet judgment begins with a shortage of global food supply. If we think that we have problems with food supply now, because of famine and because of probably greed, people's greed and so on, it will just get worse. And this judgment is one of the things telling us it will just get worse. A third of the trees globally, that means a third of global food supply through agriculture, through what we do all over the world has been affected. This is a shortage of food, global shortage of food supply, and it will obviously result in the death of many people. So we are talking about famine to some extent, and then death, and not globally, but it is mainly in one area of the earth, because there's a third of the trees being affected. But obviously, because of how interconnected the earth and the countries of the earth are, the effects will be felt globally. Now, in terms of a literal interpretation of this, in 2004, there was an asteroid that was discovered by NASA called Apophis, 99942 Apophis. And initially, when they discovered this, their projection was that this asteroid was on a collision course for Earth, and it will hit Earth on April the 13th. That's actually Friday the 13th, 2029. It's a few years from now. There's a great author called Tom Horn. Most of you probably are familiar with him. He wrote a book called The Wormwood Prophecy. It's actually a book about these verses we are looking at today, and I would like to recommend that book. In that book, he went to detail about Apophis and what NASA has to say, and why he believes this is this asteroid is a very prime candidate to fulfill its prophecy. So I would like to refer you to that book for a lot more detail. Recently, NASA came out and said that they no longer believe that this asteroid will hit Earth. If it does, they believe it will happen in another century, another 100 years from now. So they changed their projections. And you could go on their website, science.nasa.gov. You see the link there, and you could look at more details as to what they have to say. But some people, like Tom Horn, believes that this particular asteroid is a fulfillment of the prophecy. And if that is so, we could speculate. We could make some speculations. We could make some, not predictions, but we could make some speculations. This event here, this first trumpet in Revelation chapter 8 verse 7, seems to be taking place somewhere around the middle of the tribulation period, the middle of that 7 years. This asteroid is initially was set to hit Earth in 2029, April of 2029. If that time is the middle of the tribulation period, April 13, 2029, then it means that the tribulation period will begin somewhere towards the end of 2025, October, November, December 2025, which is very interesting. Now that is speculation. That is assuming that this particular asteroid is the fulfillment of these trumpet judgments, these first 4 trumpet judgments. But as I said, that's simply speculation. This is literally. But if we interpret this judgment symbolically, generally in the Bible, there are times God uses the word fire to represent his judgment or his wrath. And if you read Zechariah chapter 13, you'll see that. When you read Ezekiel chapter 5, you will see that many times that fire, that wrath and judgment of God is expressed in a literal famine. He talks about his judgment as fire, but he executes it as literal famine. And so this judgment here may not be anything, it may not have anything to do with an asteroid. It may very well be a famine released on a third part of the earth, 1/3 of the earth, with a famine that affects many people. This would be billions of people affected. And if it happens in a third part of the earth, obviously the effects will be felt globally as well, because of supply chain issues, because of people not being able to ship out the amount of food that they are accustomed to because of the famine. And so this judgment here may be talking about judgment as in the form of a famine that causes, mass deaths, where the famine takes place, but then also it affects the globe as well because of our interconnected state that we are in. Whether it is literal or symbolical, this judgment really it parallels with the judgment God released against Egypt in Exodus 9, the seventh plague that he released against Egypt. In that seventh plague, God says that he has three main reasons for this judgment. In verse 14, he says that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. That's number one. Number two, verse 16, he said to Pharaoh, to show in you my power, and that my name may be declared through all the earth. And number three, in verse 29, that you may know that the earth is the Lord's. He gives reasons for this judgment, and it may be that is the same reason for the judgment that he will be doing in this trumpets, these first four trumpets, and in this first one even more specifically. So this is trumpet number one. Number two, verses 8 and 9, and the second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood, and the third part of creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. Again, this concept of the third, the trumpet judgments is not judgments on a global scale yet. The trumpet judgment is really judgments in a smaller scale. Afterwards, when we come to the vials, that will be global. That's God completing everything he wants to do and bringing it back to how he wants it. So literally, interpreting this literally, which is how I believe it should be, this second trumpet speaks about the second stage of when an asteroid enters the Earth's atmosphere. Many times when asteroids come, they may break up into smaller parts. And so this second trumpet is a small broken off piece, a small broken off part of an asteroid which is entering Earth. The main part of the asteroid is still to come, but this is a smaller part that's broken off. And the Bible calls it here a great mountain. It says that it was cast into the sea, and then immediately when that happened, the verse says the third part of the sea became blood. Not the sea all over the world, but only a third part of it, a third part of the oceans, if we could say that. This verse doesn't say it became like blood. It didn't say it looked like blood. It said it became blood. Very interestingly. Just like if we look at Exodus chapter 7, when God judged Egypt, the judgment there, the Bible says that the river Nile turned into blood. It didn't say that the waters of Nile looked like blood or it turned into something like blood. It said it turned into blood. The Bible was very specific in that verse in Exodus and here in Revelation. So this is literal blood. How that happens, I don't know. Probably it's because of the death of the animals in the ocean. That's what the scripture is referring to. The blood being released because of the death of the animal. I'm not clear on what this is, but literally it is saying the waters turn into blood in the sea. And it says a third of the creatures in the sea died. Very interestingly. So this is again making food supply even worse. In the first trumpet, the food supply was affected because of the trees. Here, the food supply is being affected because of animal life in the sea, the fish and other forms of food we get from the sea. A third of that is now dead. So that means even less food available globally. So there's even a greater shortage of food supply. And then it says a third part of the ships were destroyed. Very interesting. The ships in the sea, a third part of them is many ships. We're talking about thousands of ships. There are many ships in the sea at any one point in time. But the issue with a third part of ships being destroyed is the ships are one of the main ways we transport cargo between countries. And so if a third part of the ships are destroyed, that means that logistic is being affected. The movement of goods is being affected. And so the supply chain is being affected. And a third part of ships mean a massive impact on supply chain. It means a massive impact on logistics. And so food is affected, and supply of not only food but other things are being affected. And so it means that this second trumpet is plunging the world into greater famine issues, and not famine, but greater food supply issues, but then supply of other things as well, whether it be electronics, whether it be things for home and whatever it is. Supply chain has been affected, and that means even though this is only referring to a third of the waters and a third of the creatures in the earth, in the sea, the supply will be felt globally. The issues, the impact will be felt globally, right? And so it means it's compounding, it's getting worse. That is literally, but if this is symbolic, one of the very interesting things is when you read Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 25, you would see where Babylon is actually called a mountain which is on fire. It talks about Babylon, a mountain. And of course, Babylon talks about the wicked system that started way back with Nimrod. And Revelation chapter 18, 17 and 18 speaks about it even more. But symbolically, this great mountain, which is on fire, may not be an asteroid. According to Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 25, it refers to Babylon. And so a great mountain being cast into the sea may very well be the judgment God is bringing on Babylon. The wickedness and all these sins, God is judging it. And also, if you read First Enoch chapter 21, verses 1 to 5, you will, and also you look at other scriptures, even Isaiah chapter 14 and Ezekiel 28. One of the things you begin to see is that this issue here with this mountain sometimes could refer to an angel. It doesn't only necessarily, in the meaning or the symbol could be Babylon, and it also represents the angel who is over Babylon, the angel or the demonic spirit who is controlling Babylon. And of course, we know that that is Satan himself. So when we look at scriptures like Jeremiah 51:25, we see that this great mountain could refer to specifically Babylon itself. But when we read scriptures, like for example, we look at the book of Enoch, First Enoch chapter 21, verse 1 to 5. This is a book that is referred to in the New Testament, and is a book that the New Testament believers were very well familiar with. And in that passage, First Enoch 21, verse 1 to 5, it speaks about mountains and so on. But it shows that they are angels. They represent, they could be used to represent angels. And so that this verse, this second trumpet may very well be speaking about an angelic or demonic spirit who is over the system called Babylon. And therefore this trumpet judgment may not have anything to do with an asteroid. It may simply be the judgment of Satan himself, who is over Babylon and controlling Babylon, and the judgment of the Babylonian system also. That's what this may be speaking about, if you interpret it symbolically. Whether literal or symbolical, this judgment parallels Exodus chapter 7, when God sent the first plague against Egypt, when the river Nile turned into blood. And the reason why he did that there, he says in Exodus chapter 7 and verse 17, "In this thou shalt know that I am the Lord." And that might be the reason again for this judgment here, that God will show that he is the Lord. Very interestingly. the third trumpet, Revelation chapter 8, verse 10 to 11. And the angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died because of the waters, because they were made bitter. Literally, if you interpret this literally, which is how I believe it should be interpreted, this third trumpet really refers to the third stage when an asteroid hits Earth. And this third stage is where the main part of the asteroid itself actually impacts. It comes into Earth's atmosphere and it actually impacts the Earth. So this is where the actual asteroid hits Earth and you get the most severe damage, the most severe consequences. And so you say he calls it a great star. The Greek word for star there is aster, A-S-T-E-R, and it actually, that is where we get the literal English word asteroid from. Aster, the Greek word, is where we get the English word asteroid from. And so this speaks about the third stage where the asteroid actually hits the Earth and it impacts the Earth. And he says it was as a burning lamp, which is how you would see when an asteroid enters the Earth's atmosphere and it burns up as it goes through the atmosphere. That long tail of fire you see from the asteroid is like a lamp, which is what John here uses to describe the asteroid, as the tail burning up as the asteroid enters the atmosphere. And again he says the third part of the rivers and the waters were affected. Again, it's not all the rivers and it's not all the streams. We talk about the fountains of waters, that refers to streams. In the second trumpet, the salt water was affected, the seas. In this third trumpet, the fresh water, rivers and streams are affected. The potable water, what men would normally drink, is affected. And of course, it became wormwood. The word wormwood is the Greek word apsinthos. Apsinthos. And it's really a word that is used as an emblem for poisonous bitterness. It doesn't mean bitterness, but it's used as an emblem for things that are poisonous and bitter. The Hebrew word for wormwood here in this passage is la'ana, and it means curse. So the name of this star is really curse or cursed. That's interesting. Also very interesting, if you look at the word Apophis or the name Apophis, which is this asteroid we were speaking about, Apophis is really an Egyptian demon of chaos. He represented all that was outside the ordered cosmos, and he threatened the underworld, and he symbolized evil. It's kind of similar to, along the same lines of what cursed speaks about. It's not exactly identical, but it's along the same lines. Alright, but that's the meaning of the word wormwood. And it says many men died. There's more deaths again because of the water. In the first instance with the trumpets before, people would have died because the food supply is affected. Now people are dying because the water supply is affected. So a third of the water supply is affected, and that will impact the earth globally. What food is affected and no water supply is affected. It will impact people globally. There's more deaths globally. The intensity is getting worse. If we think about this from a symbolical perspective, Enoch, in the book of Enoch, chapter 18 and also chapter 21, that book gives us an understanding of what the Bible means when it uses the term star. The book of Enoch is a book that is referred to in the New Testament, and is a book that the New Testament believers had access to, and it was widely used. That's why it was referred to in the New Testament. And in one of the passages in that book, Enoch said he had a vision of a place that was not in heaven and it was not in earth. If you read the book of Enoch chapter 18 and chapter 21, you would see that. And he described what he saw there. And one of the things he described was burning stars. And he specifically says burning stars were angels. These were the angels, he said, who were kept in a place of judgment. The book of Jude talks about angels who were reserved in darkness. Enoch said that he was taken to that place. And if you read Enoch, the book of Enoch, chapter 18 and chapter 21, he actually describes in some detail what he saw. It's very interesting reading. But one of the descriptions he gives is he saw these angels in this place of darkness, and they were of course they were they were being judged. But he described them as burning stars. He was talking about angels, and he described them as burning stars. So here, when this verse says that a great star, fell from heaven and was burning like a lamp, it's not referring to, many people believe it is not referring to a literal asteroid. It is a symbol. A burning star is a symbol for an angel. And again, the angel people believe being referred to here is Satan himself being judged. And so it is Satan who is the person who working through the Babylonian system. And so this third trumpet may be the judgment of Satan. And again, because if fire is involved, and from the previous verse we saw that fire talks about the judgment of God, but mainly through famine. Famine may be involved in this as well, which is obviously what would happen when the water supply is affected and when the food supply is affected. But very interestingly, this symbolical interpretation, it has a lot of support because of books like Enoch. The vision that Enoch had was very detailed, and I would encourage you to read it, and you'll get some more information. Whether we look at this literally or physically or symbolically, this particular judgment, the third trumpet, has no parallel with the plagues in Egypt. Very interestingly, the other trumpets do, but not this one. All right, the fourth trumpet, chapter 8 verse 12 to 13, and the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so that the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven. Some versions have an eagle, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of earth by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. So basically this angel is saying, these judgments now are bad, but the other three coming is going to be worse. Worst. That's basically what he is saying. Now literally, this would refer to the effects of the asteroid after it hits Earth. When an asteroid would impact Earth, one of the obvious things that begins to happen is that you have a lot of debris going back up into the atmosphere, debris flying high. When the impact takes place, all this debris shoots up into the atmosphere. One of the other things that takes place is because of the impact, there's the earthquakes that takes place. And this is not a small asteroid. This would be a large, huge asteroid, Apophis. If it is Apophis is huge. But the impact will cause earthquakes, and those earthquakes will also result eventually into the volcanoes, which will put even more gases and other things into the atmosphere. While I'm here, one of the things I also want to mention, some people interpret this as, it may not be an asteroid, it may be nuclear weapons being used. It could refer to that. It could refer to a nuclear reactor exploding and having some form of problems. And a number of different views people have. But in any event, literally this seems to be the result of debris going up into the atmosphere from the volcanoes that may take place because of the impact the asteroid has on Earth. Debris going into the atmosphere. And what that does is it causes the Earth, or at least a part of the Earth, to be overshadowed or covered with the debris, so that the light from the sun the light from the moon and the light from the stars will not be able to be seen on the earth. And that's why it says a third part of the moon, a third part of the stars, and a third part of the sun was smitten. It doesn't mean that these stars, moon, and sun are literally, affected. What it means is because of the debris that is covering a part of the earth, the light from the sun, the moon, and the stars cannot come to the earth as it should. And it says, so that a third part of them would darken, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Basically, what it means is less light is coming to the earth because of this cover of debris, and that in itself will have massive impacts on the earth, negative impacts, because this debris is covering earth, greenhouse gases. It will cause temperature problems on the earth. Light not coming to the earth will cause problems for the plant life, the little plant life that's still remaining. And will also affect us because no light to function properly. And of course, all these gases over the earth will cause problems. Debris over the earth in the atmosphere of the earth will cause problems with breathing and air quality. So this is intense suffering that will take place. This is not anything light. This is worse than how the previous trumpet judgments were. But then, what's very interesting, the angel says woe, and he says woe 3 times for each of the 3 remaining trumpets. The word woe, it is an expression of grief. Imagine that. The first 4 trumpets were physical disasters, but the next 3 will have a lot of intensified demonic and angelic activities. So this 4th trumpet is the 4th stage of the impact of an asteroid, and that 4th stage is the consequences. These debris going up, blocking air, blocking light, and causing even more suffering and more deaths on the earth. If you think about this symbolically, this would refer to the judgment of the rulers, the people who are ruling the kingdom or the Babylonian system, and those rulers will be the demonic spirits, Satan himself, and also the people who are controlling the system, the political system called Babylon, and also the religious system called Babylon. So symbolically, this trumpet judgment, it may not be talking about an asteroid. It may simply be speaking about the judgment God is going to execute on the Babylon system and its leaders, its demonic and human leaders. And you see that actually taking place in Revelation chapter 18. So the literal way to interpret this trumpet, which is what I believe it should be interpreted as, is an asteroid coming and hitting Earth. Some people believe it is a nuclear explosion. And then some people interpret this symbolically, and the symbolical way to interpret it is God's judgment on the Babylon system. Either way, physical or literal or symbolical, this judgment is parallel to the plague God sent in Egypt, the 9th plague, Exodus chapter 10. And that was darkness in Egypt. But the reason why God sent that plague in Egypt, verse 21 says, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. Very interesting. Darkness which may be felt. Thick darkness. But it talks about intense judgment. And so these are the first 4 trumpet judgments that we have. And so before we go, what I would like to do is to give us the lessons from this. The life lessons. What could we learn from this? And number 1, the trumpet judgments talk about God bringing justice for his people and punishing unrepentant men. God will bring justice. Sometimes it seems as if we as believers suffer, and we suffer long without any kind of help. And it seems as if we are suffering unfairly, and it seems as if God is not really answering. And he's not listening, he's not paying attention. And that is not true. God is a God who brings justice. And so for us, we need to be persistent and not give up faith when under pressure, but take the strength he gives so we could wait on his timing and when he is ready to bring justice. Now, it doesn't mean that God will wait until this time in the future to bring justice for us. Right now, while we are alive, God intervenes and he brings justice. But the timing may not be when we want it. And so one of the applications from this verses we looked at today is to wait on God's timing for justice. He says, vengeance is mine and I will repay. And so he brings the justice. The thing we need to do is to wait. When we one of the other things that we need to learn is God, he judges unrepentant people. Like with Pharaoh, is basically if we choose to disobey God and we choose to do it repeatedly, there comes a point in time where God just tells us, go ahead, do what you want. And he allows us to become even more hardened in that state. And we face the consequences. So don't harden your heart. That's the lesson. If we know we do things that are wrong, deal with them. Don't harden our heart, because there will come a time where God will give us up to that hardness. And he now will turn and bring more deception. There's a thing where God himself now, because we are persistent, he hardens our heart even more and we are judged. The second thing is these judgments through the trumpets are released by Jesus. He is the one who's bringing these judgments. Jesus is our Savior. He's also our high priest, and he is also our avenger. Remember, this is the revelation of Jesus, the unveiling of Jesus. And one of the things we learn here about Jesus is he's not only our Savior, he's not only our high priest who prays for us, but he is our avenger. He brings justice for us. He is the one who fights for us, so that he could perfect us and deal with our enemies while he's doing that. The persecution and the opposition that we face, Jesus takes note of it, and it will not go unpunished. The timing is what we need to be patient with. But he takes note of all this persecution taking place around the world against the church. Jesus is taking note, because this is his church and his people, and he will deal with these people who are persecuting his church. What we need to do is to leave that up to him, rather than we seek our own vengeance. We should remain faithful to him so we could receive the rewards and get justice. If we try to take justice into our own hands, we'll mess it up, and sometimes the rewards we should get, we might miss out on it because we take things into our own hands, and in so doing we might miss out the work that he gave us to do. And so the lesson from this is remain faithful to what he has given us to do. Do not be sidetracked with the persecution and the opposition. Don't give up and say, because of the persecution, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. Because if we give up, we will not receive the rewards. And then don't say, I'm going to take this into my own hands and deal with these people. Leave it up to him, because ultimately he will bring justice for us at the right time. You know, David said, he prepares a table for me in the presence of my enemies. He may not move the enemies away, but what he will do is leave them there and then let them see you sit at a table being blessed. You might want them to be removed, you might want to take them out, but what he does at times is leave them there and let them see you being blessed and let them see you prospering. But everything is in his timing. And so this is what we need to do. This is Revelation chapter 8 verse 6 to 13, the first 4 trumpets. And I'm hoping that this has been helpful and benefit to you. If so, please consider subscribing to this channel if you have not, and share your comments and your thoughts about this. But until the next time, I'm praying God's blessings on you, and I'm hoping you join me in the next video as we look at the other trumpets to come.